I've covered stuff in the past that people told me I should be concerned about.
We're talking thousands and thousands.
Sentry is characterized by a key commodity.
And food is a very obvious and central way to wield power.
I thought maybe there might be more to it than that. Turns out there was.
Place offshore, prostitution, paradis fiscaux, trafic de drogue, gestionnaire de fortune, pillage des ressources naturelles. Dans leur quête incessante de nouveaux marchés, les mafieux s'invitent dans les cercles de pouvoir avec un impératif.
Somos esas personas extrañas que mientras toda la gente va corriendo para huir, pues nosotros vamos directo a ver qué está pasando.
Hacíamos la denuncia con las imágenes y lo que escribíamos.
Se encontró el cuerpo sin vida del periodista.
Al matar a un periodista se mata el derecho de la sociedad a estar informada. Hay que decirlo una y otra vez.
Es triste que lleguemos a este punto, que no podamos hacer nuestra chamba.
Está imponiendo lo que ha llamado zonas silenciadas.
There's been one rule for the elite, especially the elite that's connected to power, and another for everybody else.
Accounts were opened in the name of these low-level, low-wage employees who do not come into the text. Money used to be deposited in those accounts, and finally they used to land in the accounts of either Mr. Hamza Shehbaz Sharif, Mr. Suleiman Shehbaz Sharif, or Mr. Shehbaz Sharif himself.
The world needs to wake up.
Проголосует Беларусь. У нас Конституция не под женщин.
The man I love was trying to topple a dictator, and then he went to jail for it. So I did what any loyal wife would do. I ran in his place.
My God, it doesn't matter how many times I watch it, it still shocks me to the core. So luckily we have 20 minutes for you guys to ask any prying questions to both Paul Radu at the OCCRP and the directors of the movie, Mathieu and Christophe. Please welcome to the stage.
Hello.
Welcome, guys. Congratulations again on an amazing documentary in a series. Mafia&Banks is a theme you've been working on for a long time. Since we only have 20 minutes, though, I want to give the floor to the audience to raise any questions. I already see a lady nodding her head. No? Oh, there the hands go. Sir, please go ahead. Ask a question.
Hi. Hi, I'm Jason Lee. I'm Taiwanese American, and well, we see just a few months ago, Singapore has discovered.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Of course, as I just a few months ago, we see that there's a huge crime in money laundering committed in Singapore. And majority of it we can see is a precursor of what's happening in the geopolitics situation in Taiwan Strait right now. And as a dual citizen of Taiwan, America, I'm very concerned because you always follow the money. And if you follow the money, you see, okay, this dirty money, what are you going to do? Buy weapons. What are you going to do? Prepare for a war. So in light of, we human beings are kind of stupid because history always repeats itself. Can you share some insight? What do you see the current cross-strait situation in Taiwan, if you know any? Thank you so much.
Maybe Paula, if you want to talk about Taiwan and Singapore?
Sure. I mean, Singapore has been for quite some years a financial center for money laundering, unfortunately. And we've seen in this brilliant film that, money launderers would use any place on earth. This is not just about Singapore. But one thing is that I was actually thinking about our work as investigative reporters. And it's not just OCCRP, it's ICIJ, it's numerous centers for investigative reporting all over the world doing this type of work. But if you take the whole quantity, the amount of money laundering that we investigated over the past 15, 17 years, it's not more than $1 trillion US. Now, $1 trillion US might seem like an enormous amount, but according to the UN, according to NASDAQ, they issued a report in January of this year, there's about 3.1, 3.2 trillion US laundered per year. So if you think about the scale, 1 trillion over 15, 17 years to maybe not 3 trillion every year, but 1 trillion every year. And still over the past decades, 30, 40 years, it's a lot of money that we haven't investigated. So I think we're seeing this many scandals because we haven't acted at scale against money laundering and against crime. What we've done this far is, I'm sorry to say, we've kind of picked cherries where it was easier to basically investigate, and that's what we need to change to have a little bit more impact.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Any other questions? No? Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead. Here up front. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ian Gary. I'm the executive director of the FACT Coalition in the U.S. Our mission is to end dirty money coming into the U.S. Obviously, this is a central part of the documentary. My question is there any distribution plan for the United States? And if so, how can we collaborate to get this film seen more widely in the U.S.?
My understanding that our production companies is somehow in talks with American counterparts. I heard at some point about a potential distribution in the US. Basically, a French documentary, it's extremely rare that Americans would take an interest in it, just because it's not American.
Well, but I'm sure if all of us push for that, we can change that. Maybe you, oh yeah, go ahead, sir.
Hello. First of all, amazing documentary. But there's, in the end, where you mentioned that the leaks don't touch in the US. Why do you think is that? Where do you think the source of the leaks are? And what about the other form of corruption, where is the interest of the actual legal companies to have wars all over the world so that they can make money and profit out of that? And how they launder that money by paying the politicians to enable wars that are happening?
Well, as to the US, then the answer is in the story. We've heard that I think maybe for the Panama Papers or for the Pandora Papers, I forgot, the person who gave out the information could be a guy working for the US government, trying to pinpoint, bad apples elsewhere in the world. Fair game. Again, the part of the iceberg that we don't know, and this is, I think, the interest of an historical film like this one, is trying to retrace bits and pieces that which, when combined, make a lot of sense historically. And then when it makes sense historically, it makes sense emotionally, intellectually, and then it makes sense politically. So in the end, I'm being screwed, but at least I know why.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, we also shouldn't forget that the first leak was only 10 years ago. And we had like Dubai unlocked a few weeks ago. The Swiss leaks were very recently. So I feel like we're getting there, but it will take some time. And
we also had important leaks from the US. The DO Secrets has worked with quite a few leaks that were generated in the US. And even these leaks that were from outside of the US, the big financial leaks, pointed out to the US being one of the culprits in enabling these criminal systems in laundering their money.
One example, sorry, I can give it's an anecdote that is not in the film. One of the guy working for the US Department of Defense, the guy who speaks about a Samsonite cash and bags full of cash, mentions ironically the role of PwC in helping Russian dirty money in Cyprus. Ironically, I read in the paper some time ago that Germany wants to help Ukraine. It's building up a fund to reconstruct Ukraine at the end of the war, and the auditing of all this will be subcontracted to PwC. So it's interesting.
I'm sure we'll get leaks. Sir?
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to direct this to Mathieu and Christophe. There's an enormous amount of source material in here that you must have had to digest.
Sorry?
There is an enormous amount of source material that you had to digest. And I'd like to ask you what were the challenges, not only in acquiring the source material, but also in digesting it and putting it in this format?
Comment est-ce qu'on a digéré l'info? When you sort of bypass certain information and you decided, like cutting classes, I'm not going to follow that. If you do it in a smart way, it works. If you don't do it in a smart way, it doesn't work. So have we been smart? I don't know. I can tell you I was supposed to read hundreds of books, and I only read maybe 5 or 10, which is ridiculously small. I had to go, reading like this because just time was short. On any of the elements over there, we could have expanded a lot. For example, the head of the Armenian mafia, whose funerals take place in 1993, was actually killed in the prison of Lefortovo in Russia by Chechen gangsters. That's an anecdote that I think is very revealing, but it's just a small thing. We can't speak about it. Thanks to Paul, his presence in the film and his the metrics that the paradigm that he set up save a lot of time for us because he put concept behind something which was very fragmented and a mosaic, and in the end, so I view this film as being the story and the content that I would, as a 17 years old, just before what we call in France baccalaureate, final exam before going to university, that I would read. The history book that I would read when I'm 17 in the last class before baccalaureate is already a very, very good history book if it's well done. Everything goes very quickly, but everything is there. So it's, by definition, not a specialist film. It's just a digest. But we try to put some humor into it that's a fundamental thing. Christophe and I, we come from a very different background, but we try to bring humor into it. Because again, humor brings up the emotion and reminds us that we are not only minds, but we're trying to think, and we're trying to be treated as citizens. Because basically, the only people in the world that we don't speak about in this film are the 99% of people who are the victims of this system. That's us. So it's a film for us. And it's for us to understand that among the many challenges that we have in this world today, that can be terrorism, that can be Putin, that can be epidemics, pandemics, Islamism, inequality, tax evasion, we also have to take into account another enemy. So we live in a world with a lot of enemies. And, it's extraordinarily difficult, as we said the other day when we talked. It's very, very difficult today to be a citizen because you have to incorporate so many challenges to your life. So we had to bring this up to the audience. And of course, when we put all the elements together, in the end it makes sense. And we've done this for a century all over the globe. And if you look at the first fraudsters, bank, corrupt criminals at the time of Cosa Nostra at the US in the 1990s, in the 1920s, sorry. They look like a bit like Steve Jobs, starting Apple in his garage. And today we have what experts call white-collar organized crime. We used to have white-collar crime, we used to have organized crime, and now you see in this film, the big presence in this film that is not so obvious in the previous film we did for this series of film is the presence of state. Because the outlaw wants to raid the bank, and at some point he understands in order to raid the bank, it's better to own the bank. But at some point, if you push the logic forward, the best way is to own the country. Because the country is where the power lies, and where the stamps lies, you can legitimize absolutely everything.
Thank you. Over there, the lady all the way on the right. Oh, no, you can give it to her first, and then I go next to the lady. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Anna Koens. I work for Journalism Fund Europe, and we fund investigative journalism in public interest. And I was born and grew up in Moscow, and this movie is so good, I nearly cried. Like, I witnessed most of this firsthand, like all of this, growing up in the 90s. And it's very interesting what you said now about 17 years old, because my original question, even before you mentioned it, was whether you could think of some sort of distribution plan for people finishing high school or like entering universities. And then at the same time, I thought, actually, it's so good, it could make people convince joint organized crime networks. Because in Russia in the 90s, being a killer was considered a good career for a boy from a small town. Becoming a paid sex worker was a great career for a girl even in a bigger city. So I'm wondering if any of the people whom you spoke to, whom you interviewed for the film and showed or otherwise, mentioned, if there is a potential for a mechanism to tackle this on the global level, what you mentioned towards the end of the film, whether Interpol could play a bigger role, whether there could be some international network set up for this purpose. Yeah, and the distribution plan is the other question. Thank you so much.
Let's also take the second and the third question, and then we'll go to the panelists.
Hi, yeah, thank you. This is really fascinating. My name is Miko Martini. I work for WWF on environmental corruption. I think what's interesting, amongst many things, is the way that you show the commonality of the mechanisms used across different crime types. And I know you mentioned that you sort of had to pick winners, I suppose, but I'm curious, with environmental crime, by some estimates being the 4th largest crime activity in the world, whether you came across convergence in using these mechanisms with forms of environmental crime as well.
And then the third question for the gentleman over there.
Thank you for this movie. I learned a lot. And just a quick question. My impression is that these guys are very legit. These guys are big and they have big influences. They're part of economy. They're legitimate players, not only in offshore zones, but in every country where they can go. And they can be even, for some, the boost for economies. They are like building, they're creating, I don't know, they're feeding people. So how do you reflect on that?
Thank you so much.
So thanks for the hope of, expanding the views, the visibility of this series of film, but of course, it's not in our hands. As to environmental crimes, Christophe and I were starting to think about it right now, trying to find an original way to speak about that, because many films have been done before, and that's also a challenge when you do a documentary. Out of respect for the viewers, never do what others did before you and probably better than you. So try to find just a matter of self-respect and respect for the viewers. And to be honest, we spent a lot of time in trying to downsize and sum up what we found about Putin's Russia and China. One guy in the beginning is mentioned in passing, and you've probably forgotten his name. He was born in Lithuania, by the way, Boris Birstein. This guy and his clique are among the people that 15 years later, starting in the 1990s, started to help and enter into deals with a guy who is famous, who is Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been doing business with ex-former Soviet Union people for years and years. I mean, they're his official business partners, and it's a story we couldn't tell in the film. China, same story. By the way, extremely difficult to cover, to have, at least in France, relevant information about triads. We basically have no expert on triads in France. So basically, we spend a lot of time on all this. And Hezbollah, long story also, because who would expect Hezbollah to be, again, the notion of diasporas, a lot of Arab-speaking diasporas in Latin America, so of course it makes sense. So we had to combine, again, a lot of things, and the environmental crime wasn't there. And interesting as well, I mean, there is no notion in this film about the Albanian mafia, which is probably one of the most fearsome mafia in the world, or at least in Europe. So certain things we didn't speak about, and the rest were the major elephant in the rooms that we did cover.
And maybe, Paul, did you want to add something?
Just on the environmental crime, for a long time at OCCRP, and I believe at other investigative reporting networks, we didn't quite pay attention to that. But for the past 5 years, everybody's focused on that, because you can't investigate organized crime without seeing the impact that they have on the environment. I mean, all these trillions that are laundered go into buying not just posh real estate in London or the south of France or Miami. They go into buying large surfaces of forest, large surfaces of water. We've seen the same organized crime groups that launder the money through here in Vilnius or in Riga across the borders or in Tallinn across the other border. The same groups, are involved in illegal deforestation in Brazil, and they are laundering the money through New York. So, I mean, you're completely right. That's what where we need, as investigative reporters, we need to focus more in order to kind of show that, and not just show, but stop it. On the question of the organized crime kind of almost fulfilling a social role, right? I mean, this is what they want you to believe. This is exactly how they capture states, because they say, look, the government is inefficient. We can provide the services. This is what happens in Mexico. This is what happens in many countries around the world. But the reality is, when you look at the bank accounts, is that you see that they steal billions. Out of that billions, 0.1% goes into the pockets of the politicians, because politicians are cheap. So that's the corruption. The rest stays with the criminals, and then they put some percentage back into the society in building a church, maybe a hospital, and so on and so on. But that is, tiny compared to what they actually steal. So they are very extractive, but they seem like giving back more than the politicians. The only reason is that the politicians don't have that much money. I mean, they steal a lot, but not as much as large transnational organized crime groups.
I'm going to take one final question at the gentleman all the way at the back, who has been waving at me for a while. And that's unfortunately all the time that we have for today. Sir, final question. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Omar Yakubu, Center for Fiscal Transparency in Nigeria. Brilliant movie. All I wanted to say, I did not see you reflect the importance of the only global mechanism for combating money laundering, which is the FATF, to see their rules and effectiveness curbing this vice that seems to be global. Maybe in the next movie you could decide to include them. Thank you.
Yeah, the Financial Action Task Force. I think all of us noticed that some of the well-known transit and destination jurisdictions have not been grey-listed, so that's maybe something you could do the next Mafia&Banks series on. I think everybody here would welcome that. You wanted to add anything about FATF, Paul?
Just that, you know, everybody's trying, right? I mean, the EU is issuing money laundering, anti-money laundering directive after anti-money laundering directive, and that's great. FATF is great, you know, and there are other bodies doing really good work. But the reality is that the criminals are very, very creative. The criminals are very, very smart, and they don't act inside the same confines as these organizations. They collaborate across borders. They organize these meetings, right, in Vancouver, or, you know, I mean, they organize workshops together to create strategies between transnational organized crime groups. And this is what we need to do more on our side, to be able to foresee the future of money laundering, and not just to be, you know, we're always reactive. We need to be proactive with it.
Thank you so much. Behind us is the QR code. Send it to your friends because the documentary is available for anybody in the US to watch or anywhere else. It's on YouTube.
It's a three-part. It's a three-part movie.
It's a three-part, yeah. Exactly. Oh, all three of them are available. Yeah, yeah. Lovely. I haven't had the chance to watch part 1 and 2. We will share this also online with all of you. Already 2 million people have viewed, including 400,000 young people. So it's spreading like wildfire, just like financial crime. So let's see if we can counter something to that. A big hand for my panelists and all of you audience for today.
Hello. Just before you go, I'd like to thank Anrike Visser very much for chairing so beautifully. So thank you very much, Anrike, and for you all. And I would like to say that we have another screening at 5 o'clock, a brilliant film from Mexico, featuring the extraordinary challenges facing free media in Mexico, which I think is a well-known story, but there's something extremely important within this film, and also within the context of the work here at IACC. They're very, very keen to make connections with all sorts of different stakeholders. So please do come back for 5 o'clock. And then tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, we have another excellent film called Behind the Closed Doors, which shows the relationship between the City of London in particular, but other Western forces that facilitate the political elites in 3 countries, Kenya, Azerbaijan and Pakistan, and showing how those political regimes and the dynasties of corruption are upheld by the City of London and other financial institutions. So please, that's another one for 11 o'clock tomorrow. And of course, our final event on Friday, which is at the prison in Vilnius Center, which is The Accidental President, which is an extraordinary movie about the president-elect from Belarus who's in exile in this city and will be appearing to speak after this biographical documentary of her campaign in Belarus. So thank you very much indeed, and I look forward to seeing you for these additional films.